5 years ago, James said he loved me. He was willing to do anything for me. But when I needed help the most, he stood by and did nothing. After that, I left. James desperately searched for me. Oh, James, I'm no longer the Emily I used to be. Years later, I returned to Chicago. Everything has changed. Just got off the plane. An old friend came to pick me up. He looked at me. It seemed like he had a lot of feelings. This long-lost city has undergone tremendous changes. But my memories still linger in the past. I looked at Lucas. Smiling, I asked, "What's up? It's been so long since we last met. Do you not recognize me anymore?" Lucas waved his hand. He smiled and said, "You're still the same. Still love wearing white dresses and sneakers. Back in high school, you were the star of the school. Who didn't know the name Emily? But you are already different now. The Emily in my memory disappeared in the summer of that year." I heard his sarcastic words. I was taken aback for a moment. So many years have passed. Can he still not let go? Back then, James got into trouble trying to save me. Everyone thought I hid away after I ran away. But no one knew I was injured too. They all thought I left James out of fear. No one believed me. Back then, I faced the misunderstandings from my classmates and James alone. I was very sad at that time. I cried too, now that so much time has passed. I am no longer that weak girl who could only cry. Those past pains have long since faded with the passage of time. Lucas, everyone will change. You and I are no exception. Everyone will change. You and I are the same. I'm back this time just to pay my respects to my grandmother. This is the only thing I care about in Chicago. Please don't tell anyone about my return. I just want to quietly see Grandma and then leave here quietly. I don't want to leave any traces. Chicago means nothing to me now. Only painful memories remain. What about him? The things that happened after you left. Don't you care at all? Lucas looked at me, his eyes filled with confusion and inquiry. Him, James, I thought of that name again. There was an indescribable feeling in my heart. A dull ache lingered somewhere inside. Time really flies. It feels like he was from a past life to me. But what happened between us is deeply etched in my heart. I can't forget it even if I want to. I pretended to be indifferent as I said, "It's been so long." He should have let it go by now. Lucas shook his head. His expression seemed conflicted. There was some disappointment in his gaze, but he didn't say anything. I don't want to have an unpleasant encounter with a friend I haven't seen in years. He didn't ask any further questions. We tacitly ended the topic. In the restaurant, Lucas talked to me about his experiences over the years. I didn't expect that. The him who used to struggle with his studies. Now he has actually become a university professor. Then, we talked about my experiences after going abroad. I was admitted to a prestigious university in London. I successfully completed my studies. Now I can be considered a well-known painter. Lucas suddenly asked me, "Why did you stop dancing? You were determined to become a principal dancer in ballet." Upon hearing this, I was taken aback for a moment. Memories from the past suddenly resurfaced. Those memories seemed to be shrouded in shadows. Even my injured ankle seemed to start aching again. Principal dancer. This term feels so distant now. That dream I once could almost reach. I've long lost the qualification to pursue my dreams. I forced a bitter smile. My eyes slightly reddened. I'm no longer qualified to dance. Perhaps it's a punishment from heaven. I will never dance again in this lifetime. I lifted my head. I tried hard to squeeze out a smile. That summer, I not only lost my dreams, I also lost the person I loved most in this life. But who else, besides me, would care? Lucas looked at me. His gaze was filled with complex emotions. "Why did you suddenly leave back then? You didn't even say goodbye. What exactly are you hiding from? It's pointless to say these things now. The past is long gone." I know he often keeps in touch with James. There's no way I could tell him about these things, but he still stubbornly clings to the past. He said, "I just can't believe what happened with Emily. I don't believe Emily's matter at all. There must be inside information here that others don't know. The old scars seem to have not healed yet. It still hurts if I touch it. I haven't truly let this matter go before, but unfortunately, it seems everyone has accepted this outcome. So, previously, everyone thought this matter was certain. No one doubted it. Lucas, didn't you think the same way?" He was taken aback for a moment. It seems my words caught him off guard. He looked at me. His tone carried a hint of helplessness. "Emily, I never expected we would have a day like this. After you went abroad, James has changed too. We can never go back to how it was before." I had no expression on my face, but I couldn't help but think of him inside. Since I left, I haven't contacted him again. I can't deceive myself about him. I can never let it go, no matter the past or present, as long as he is around. I become weak and powerless. Every time I think of him, my heart aches faintly. I can't tell if that was love, or if it slowly turned into hatred later. In that unforgettable youthful period, everywhere bears his imprint. I remained silent, but Lucas seems unable to stop. He keeps talking endlessly. He said, James has changed too, changed to the point where we all feel we don't recognize him. Right after you went abroad, you tell me what happened. That turned him, who was originally a studious nerd, into someone so gloomy and indifferent, now living like a cold stone, completely unfeeling. My heart sank involuntarily. I remember that sunny, warm boy, now turned into this. Could it be because of me? But I don't have the courage to inquire about him. I can only try to forget. I was just about to speak, when I suddenly heard a voice that was both unfamiliar and familiar. I was instantly stunned. Lucas, you're here too. It's him. James, my ex-boyfriend whom I loved deeply. He used to be my morning star, and also a pain in my heart that is hard to erase. I can't help but feel anxious. His appearance made my mind go blank in an instant. James stood in front of the dining table. I lowered my head, my heart was in turmoil. Then, I heard him say softly in a slightly hoarse voice, "This young lady resembles someone I know." Lucas looked a bit awkward. It was clear that James had recognized me. I tried to calm my unease and those indescribable emotions. Then I slowly raised my head to look over. James was wearing an all-black suit. He wasn't wearing glasses. He appeared very indifferent when he looked at me. His gaze carried a kind of stubbornness and a hint of hatred. Next to him stood a woman in a beautiful dress. She was very attractive. He seems to have changed. He's not the same as I remember. Emily has finally returned. He looked at me with a sarcastic tone full of hostility. The woman next to him also turned to look at me. Her gaze was filled with disdain. This scene made my eyes sting a bit, yet I found it somewhat amusing. Why would I still feel this way? I forced myself to sound calm as I spoke. James, long time no see. I really didn't expect we'd meet again in this lifetime. It seems my attitude annoyed him. James said angrily, "Emily, stop acting. You're nothing but a heartless person. I saw through you long ago." James's eyes were filled with obvious disgust. He curled his lips, let out a cold laugh. Even if he said that, I didn't want to argue back, because it was hard for me to control my emotions in front of him. I sighed helplessly. "James, you're still so immature. Say whatever you want to say. What we had between us has long been over." James's eyes were red. He was both angry and sad about what I said. He said to me angrily, "Emily, you're always so full of yourself. Why do you say that the past is just the past? Do you still want to just walk away like this? You're so cold-hearted. Don't think those things can be easily settled." I heard him say that. I felt a bit uncomfortable inside. I originally didn't want to argue with him much, but I still couldn't hold back. I let out a cold laugh. "Speak right. James, that's just the kind of person I am. Didn't you see me this way back then? So what if I'm cold-blooded? Who are you now? What right do you have to control me?" James's expression suddenly turned very ugly. It was almost as dark as his suit. He stared at me with eyes full of resentment and anger. I looked into his eyes. They were filled with pain. It made me feel both familiar and heartbroken. Lucas was trying to smooth things over. "Everyone, please calm down. It's not easy for us to gather together. We haven't seen each other in so many years. Emily has finally come back for a visit." I took a moment to compose myself, thinking to myself, yeah, what was I even arguing with him about? It's pointless to talk about these things now. James still looked indifferent. The woman next to him was watching all of this. She smiled and spoke up. "So you are the famous Emily? I heard you used to be with James. I always wanted to meet you. It seems like this is how it is." I wasn't in the mood to continue the conversation, nor did I want to pay attention to her barbed remarks. But she seemed very interested. She said, "I've heard quite a bit about Emily as well. You've just returned. Why don't we have a good chat tonight? Let me treat you to a welcome dinner." I smiled politely. "Go ahead. This sister. I'm not familiar with you. I'm not familiar with James either. You guys go ahead." After saying that, I picked up my bag and got ready to leave. James suddenly grabbed me. The warmth from his hand startled me for a moment. I lost my balance for a second. I fell directly into his arms. James looked down at me. He was also taken aback in that moment. It felt like we were back in the past. I quickly avoided his gaze. I pushed him away swiftly, but James held onto my hand tightly, refusing to let go. After calming down, he returned to that cold attitude. James stubbornly stared at me. He asked coldly, "Emily, what exactly do you want to do by coming back this time?" I adjusted the loose hair on my forehead and gave him a cold smile. What else could it be for if it weren't to honor my grandmother? I wouldn't have come back at all. There's nothing in Chicago worth my nostalgia anymore. I'm not sure if he got the answer he wanted. He held my hand tightly, stronger and stronger. I don't want to linger any longer. I ignored his reddened eyes. After breaking free from his hand, I turned and left. Lucas caught up with me. He brought up James. I didn't take it in at all. He just wanted to speak well of James. I looked at him and said directly, "We can never go back to the past. James, Lucas, and I used to be good friends, but now it has turned into this. It's truly both pathetic and ridiculous." I walked slowly to the river alone. The night wind made me shiver. I took off my strong facade, realizing that I am still vulnerable. I cannot face them calmly. Even more so, I cannot ignore James and the woman beside him. James's words are like a sharp knife. They pierce deep into my heart. Cold and painful. They almost take my breath away. I'm still as weak as I was that summer. Teardrops flow down unconsciously. My body trembles continuously. I really wish all the pain could end at this moment. I'm a bit dazed. It feels like I see James appearing in front of me. He looks just as confident. He seems no different from the past, 5 years ago. Lucas smiled and said to me, "Emily, you're so grown up yet still need James to carry you. That's a bit spoiled, isn't it?" I replied nonchalantly. "James is my boyfriend. He didn't say anything. You're defending him now. Lucas, I think you're itching for a fight." I waved my fist at Lucas as a show of threat. We're already in our senior year. Logically, we should be buried in our studies in the classroom right now. But our homeroom teacher has always advocated for a balance between work and rest. He is worried that we are studying too hard. He specifically took us hiking. I don't have good stamina. I couldn't hold on halfway. James saw how hard I was struggling. He couldn't bear it, so he carried me and continued walking. I leaned against his back. I could feel his body heat. His back had some firm muscles. His arms around me were also very strong. He seemed to notice my gaze. He looked down and smiled at me. James, in his teens, was full of spirit. He had an extraordinary presence. He always managed to catch people's attention at a glance. At that time, his eyes looked at me with affection and indulgence. After dating James for a year, I only found out that he actually liked me for a long time. But he had never expressed it. However, every time I encountered trouble, he was always the first to care about me. It took me a long time to understand. No wonder the top student in the grade only wanted to help me with tutoring. Every time a boy shows interest in me, he always stands coldly to the side. I didn't expect James to be such a reserved person. I often tease him about these things. Every time I mention him, he gets shy and a bit angry. Summers in Chicago are always particularly hot. The classmates can't stand the heat. They all shout that they want to take a break. The homeroom teacher sees everyone like this. "Let's go to a shady place to rest." James spreads his jacket on the grass. He says to Emily, "You sit for a while first. Have some water." I watch the beads of sweat on James's forehead. I pick up a handkerchief to help him wipe his sweat. He smiles at me. It makes my face turn red. We've been together for so long. I still feel this way. I secretly blame myself for being too easily shy. "James, I want to eat an orange. Can you help me peel it, James? I feel a bit hot. Can you fan me a little?" I'm giving him orders without holding back, because I know that no matter what I want, James will never refuse. The classmates around have already gotten used to it. After all, the whole Chicago high school knows that James likes Emily. Emily is James's principal. Everyone is discussing the college entrance examination. After all, there are only 2 months left until the exam. Lucas also came over to ask, "Emily, which university do you all want to apply to?" I turned to look at James and asked, "I'm planning to apply to Harvard. My grandmother has always hoped I could go there." Lucas sighed. "James, you all went to Harvard. What am I? A bad student, supposed to do? Forget it. I'll just listen to my dad." "Study abroad," I said. "James, are you also going to Harvard?" Lucas scoffed. With a hint of disdain, he said to me, "Emily, you wouldn't not know, right? Where are you?" "James goes wherever that is. His family has argued about his studying abroad several times. Now I understand. So that was why James asked me about my aspirations. James's grades are more than enough for Harvard. No wonder his parents don't approve." James said calmly, "My parents can't control me. Harvard is pretty good too." "What's so good about Harvard?" It's the person going to Harvard that's good. Okay, James. Look, you're completely under Emily's thumb now. I estimate you'll regret it sooner or later. James listened to Lucas's words. He raised an eyebrow. He said, Lucas, have you been too idle lately? Do you want me to talk to your uncle to double your project? Lucas heard this. He felt angry but didn't dare to show it. He could only helplessly say, all right. I won't get involved in your matters. Can I not avoid it if I can't provoke it? My thoughts are a bit chaotic. I don't know what to say. James walked over and hugged me. He patted my head. He said, What are you thinking? You look so dazed. Upon hearing this, I couldn't help but smile. James, you're the silly one. Why go to Harvard for my sake? You clearly have better choices. James replied, Emily, for me. It doesn't matter which university I go to. I just want to be with you. I also worry about you being alone, I said stubbornly. Even if we're not at the same university, we're still together, right? I'm not a child. I can take care of myself. James stared at me seriously. His eyes were filled with deep emotions. He said, I'm really worried. I'm worried about when I'm not around. Will someone pursue you? I'm worried about not being by your side. I can't care for you in time. I'm still worried. As time goes by, you might gradually like me less. My heart was suddenly touched. It feels bittersweet and soft. James always knows how to soften my heart. Looking at his face, I can't help but think, James, we must always be together, never to part. After resting well, we continue to move forward. But we found that the signposts on the road seemed to be damaged. After going in a big circle, we actually got lost. Our teacher held the map, looking left and right. Still couldn't figure out where we are. The classmates started to sigh. They seemed a bit impatient. We dared not walk casually anymore, afraid it would get messier the more we walked. So, our teacher decided to send someone ahead to scout the way. I looked around and found that James had the best stamina, so I chose him. James nodded. Let me stay here, I said to him. James, I'll go with you. Emily, you wait here, I'll be back soon. All the way, James was carrying me. I didn't feel tired. I just wanted to follow him. In the end, James gave in. He took my backpack and left. I secretly smiled. I quickly ran up and held his hand. The wind in the mountains was refreshing. Wild fruits hung from the dense bushes nearby. I picked one and handed it to James, but he refused to eat it. He said there are many bugs in the mountains. Wild fruits can't be eaten. I knew he was a germaphobe. I said that on purpose, James. If you don't eat it, I'll just shove it in your mouth. After saying that, I reached out to pinch his face. James quickly dodged, with a look of helplessness. I couldn't help but laugh when I saw his awkward expression. We joked and laughed all the way to the next signpost. That signpost had been damaged. It was clearly vandalism. James frowned and said we could only go back the way we came, just as we were about to leave. We faintly heard a commotion coming from the woods. We hadn't encountered anyone along the way. James and I decided to go check it out. To my shock, I witnessed a horrifying scene. 2 men in black were stabbing a man with knives. Each stab drew blood. The man couldn't hold on and knelt on the ground. He was kicked by the 2 men. His whole body was covered in blood. Seeing this scene, I was stunned in fear. James quickly covered my mouth, telling me to be quiet. But it was already too late. The man noticed us. He cried out for help loudly. The 2 men in black glared at us fiercely. One punched the man, knocking him to the ground. Then they charged at me and James. James grabbed my hand and shouted to run. My heart was racing. I was so scared I thought I might lose my mind. This was the first time I encountered something like this. My mind was filled with the images from just now. That person was bleeding a lot. I didn't know if they were already beyond help. James was urging me in my ear. Emily, run, let's go find a teacher. The path in the woods was uneven. It was hard to walk. Even though we were running fast, we were still caught up to. James picked up a thick branch from the ground, preparing to defend ourselves. There was a group of us nearby. We didn't see anything you 2 did just now. If you want money, we can give it to you. The man beside us spoke with a strong accent. You want money? How much can you give? Before James could respond, another man in black said, Don't listen to him. The person just now still doesn't know if they are dead or alive. If we let this kid and the girl go, we'll be in trouble. James stood in front of me. He kept comforting me, telling me not to be afraid. I clung tightly to his back. I was trembling in fear. I secretly took out my phone. I wanted to send a message to the homeroom teacher to call the police. Those 2 men in black rushed over, trying to catch us. James immediately picked up a branch and fought them. James rarely gets into fights, but this time he fought with all his strength. For a moment, neither side could gain the upper hand, but the other side had a knife. When James was fighting one of them, he didn't dodge in time. His arm was stabbed by the knife. I was hiding in the corner. My hands were shaking badly. I wanted to call for help on my phone, but there was no signal. I couldn't get through at all. The man in black noticed I was holding my phone. He immediately shouted, "Quick, grab her. Don't let her call the police. He'll come to catch me as soon as he hears that." James saw that I was in danger. He immediately shouted, "Emily, run, go find someone to help." After saying that, he tightly held onto those two people, not letting them chase me. Those two were hitting hard. James was beaten without the ability to fight back. I gritted my teeth. Crying, I ran forward. I looked back and saw James covered in blood. Yet he still held onto them tightly, shouting out loud, "Emily, run." I ran while crying. My heart was about to give out. "James, I'm really so scared. You must be safe." I only had one thought in my mind. I have to find someone to save him. I want to save James. It's almost dark. There are trees all around. I'm out of breath. My heart is in a mess. I charged directly towards the bushes ahead. Those branches are all thorny. My hands and feet are scratched and bleeding. It feels like something has pierced my ankle. The pain is making it almost impossible for me to walk. I staggered forward. My tears kept flowing. I could no longer feel anything. It quickly became dark. The dark woods were eerily quiet. I dragged my feet. Suddenly, I stepped on something. I fell down immediately, before losing consciousness. I had only one thought in my mind. "James, I have to save James." I don't know how long it has been. I regained consciousness. I opened my eyes. It was still pitch black around me. I couldn't care less about the injuries on my feet. I ran forward with all my might. Finally, I saw a familiar crowd. The teacher saw my condition. I was startled. I started to speak. "James," I hadn't finished my sentence. The teacher interrupted me. "James has already been taken to the hospital. He was stabbed multiple times by the assailant. The situation is critical. He may be in life-threatening danger." Suddenly, everything went dark. I felt the world spinning around me. Then I lost consciousness. It was like a particularly long dream. When I woke up again, I found myself lying in the hospital, with an Roman 4 drip in my hand. My feet were wrapped in bandages. My grandmother saw that I was awake. She asked with concern, "Emily, how are you feeling? Is there anywhere that hurts?" My voice was hoarse. I asked anxiously, "Grandma, what about James? How is he doing? Is he okay?" Grandma sighed and said, "He has finished the surgery. He is currently recovering. The doctor said so. There is no longer any danger to his life." Upon hearing this news, I breathed a sigh of relief. Tears couldn't help but flow down. "That's great. I'm glad James is okay." Seeing me like this, Grandma hugged me with concern. Seeing her worried face, I quickly reassured her that I was fine. The doctor came over to check my wounds. He looked at me. He said my leg was injured quite badly. It would need several detailed examinations. I didn't pay much attention at the time. I thought this was just a routine procedure. I picked up my phone. I wanted to contact James. If he woke up, he should send me a message. I stared at the blank chat interface. I felt a little sad inside. I want to see James, to see how he has been lately. But I didn't wait for James. Instead, it was his dad who came. James's dad is dressed in a suit. He is looking at me with a serious expression. "Speak, you must be Emily." I responded somewhat flustered. "That's me." The other party continued. "I am James's father. The incident you encountered on the mountain. Those two suspects have confessed. James did it for you. He even risked his life to protect you. I didn't expect my son would do such a thing." I said with a bit of guilt. "James is a really good person. He has always protected me." I hadn't finished my sentence yet. James's dad interrupted. "Unfortunately, James encountered bad people. He was almost killed by them. And you didn't know where to hide. If the homeroom teacher hadn't called the police in time, he might really have died there." Upon hearing this, I was so scared I was shaking all over. I stammered, "I'm sorry. James asked me to find someone to call the police. But I ran for a long time and didn't see a single person. It's too dark. I accidentally fell into a pit and passed out. When I woke up, I realized someone had come to rescue me. It's all my fault. I didn't go look for help sooner. It's all my fault. James got hurt while trying to protect me. I feel both regretful and sad." My tears couldn't stop flowing. James' father saw this scene. He just coldly smiled and said, "Little girl, you have to have a conscience. I know you're scared. You didn't dare to call the police. So you hid alone. You said you passed out. I don't believe it could be that coincidental." I explained loudly. It really wasn't like that. I passed out because of that. I did not want to call the police, nor did I not want to save James. James' father's tone was very firm. He questioned, "James was with you. What did he get? You didn't listen to my arrangements back then. Not studying abroad, insisting on choosing Harvard. You missed such a great opportunity, and now you've been hurt by someone. You almost lost your life. This is all because of you. You and James are not even in the same league. My heart is filled with pain. It's almost drowning me. Uncle, it's my fault. James's dad doesn't believe my explanation. He still thinks I deliberately abandoned James. I didn't report it to the police for help. From now on, I can no longer be with James. I know James's dad doesn't like me. He even guesses the worst about me. I understand as well. He sent James abroad to study. It is indeed for James's own good. I now feel like I'm trapped in a web woven from a maze. I can't escape at all. I can't find my way out. My heart is always in turmoil. I don't know what to do. I stayed in the hospital for a few days. I couldn't reach James at all. I felt uneasy the whole time. I always felt something was going to happen. Grandma kept sighing behind my back. I saw the doctor shake his head. I touched my ankle wrapped in bandages. I asked softly, "Doctor, please tell me honestly, am I never going to dance again?" The doctor showed a pained expression. He told me my ankle was pierced by a foreign object. Walking is fine, but dancing is impossible. I felt as if I was frozen. The thought that I can't dance kept repeating in my mind. Why can't I dance? Dancing is something I've insisted on since I was a child. Becoming a principal ballerina has been my lifelong dream. Grandma's eyes were filled with tears. She hugged me tightly and said, "Emily, if you want to cry, just cry." I lay in Grandma's arms, crying like a child. "Grandma, what should I do? I can no longer dance. I really can't dance anymore. I can't become the principal dancer in ballet. I can't even dance at all. It feels like the whole world is against me." In just a few days, I have been through too much. My tears are almost dried up, but James is not by my side. I still can't accept this fact. After I can get up, I have been practicing all along, but as soon as I jump, my ankle will sting. In the end, I can't hold on and fall to the ground. Just then, Lucas arrived. He helped me to the bed. He asked me what was wrong. I just shook my head. I didn't tell him. Lucas said, "James is awake, although he has many injuries. It's not a big problem. He'll be fine with some rest." I nodded. I wanted to ask him why James hasn't contacted me, but as I looked up, I found him looking at me with a strange expression. I couldn't help but ask, "Lucas, what's wrong with you?" Lucas slowly asked. "They all said you abandoned James and ran away. What exactly happened?" I recalled what James' father said. I understood in my heart. Even if I said it out loud, no one would believe me. What a coincidence. At that time, I had just fainted. I couldn't find someone to help in time. As a result, it was too late. My throat felt like it was blocked by a fishbone. I couldn't speak. Seeing me like this, Lucas let out a cold snort. "Speak. Emily, it feels like I only truly got to know you today. What they said, is it really true?" I remained silent. Lucas walked away sadly. After being discharged, I returned to school. Everyone who saw me was gossiping. Some people are still mocking me. They say I am ungrateful. It seems they are all like James' dad. They think I don't know how to be grateful. James' injury, I want to ask him, but he has been indifferent. It seems he has heard about the classmates' discussions. Does he believe them? These past few days, his attitude towards me has been lukewarm. I originally wanted to find an opportunity to explain clearly to him, but the sudden event disrupted my plans. My grandmother passed away. A perfectly healthy person just left like that. I only remember my grandmother tightly holding my hand and saying, "Emily, you need to live well. My little Emily, since that incident, you have been very sad. You often cry alone in secret if you are unhappy. Just leave. It's okay if you don't go to Harvard. As long as you can be happy, that's all that matters." I took a leave of absence from school. I personally held the funeral for my grandmother. Early the next morning, James' dad came to find me. He looked very sad. He told me James applied to Harvard. He hopes I can persuade him. I was stunned after hearing this. With the application form left by James' dad, I went to find James. "You need to change your application. I'm not going to Harvard anymore." James stared at me coldly. "Emily, what do you mean by that?" I replied calmly, pretending to be composed. "James, I've seen how you've been acting during this time. I think we don't need to continue being together. For you, I went to Harvard for you. I fought hard. But in the end, you want to completely separate from me. Are you really that indifferent? Why didn't you call the police then?" "Why?" James shouted at me. I gave a bitter smile. Say it. You think so too, huh? Yes, I'm the kind of person who is cold and heartless. James, let's stop here. Since then, I went abroad, cut off all contact. I never saw James again. The wind by the river is cold enough to make one shiver. I wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes. I walked home step by step. The next day, I went to pay my respects to my grandmother. Lucas insisted on going with me. I originally wanted to refuse, but he insisted on driving to pick me up. I couldn't decline any longer. Unexpectedly, when I opened the passenger door, I found out that it was actually James who was driving. I was taken aback for a moment. I took a half step back. I felt a bit reluctant to get in the car. James noticed my movement. His expression turned quite ugly. He said, "Lucas said his car broke down. Let me pick you up. Get in the car quickly. Don't waste any more time." I pressed my lips together. Still, I got in the car. When fastening the seatbelt, I found it seemed to be stuck. The clicking sound felt particularly strange in this quiet environment. James seemed a bit impatient. He reached out and pulled the seatbelt away. His casual motion accidentally brushed against my face. We were both stunned. An inexplicable sense of ambiguity instantly enveloped us. Coming back to my senses, our gazes instinctively avoided each other. James continued to drive. "How have you been these years abroad?" Hearing his words, I pretended to be calm. I studied and worked in college abroad. Everything went smoothly. I also made quite a few good friends. I had a pretty happy life. He let out a cold snort upon hearing this. It seemed my good life made him quite unhappy. "So why did you suddenly leave back then?" He finally couldn't help but ask. "James, at that time we had already broken up. I don't need to explain anything to you. Going abroad is my own decision." James is staring at me. Clearly, he is angry again. "You told me not to go to Harvard. It's because you aren't going either." "Right. I never agreed to break up in the first place." I sighed. I didn't know what to say for a moment. "Do you need my approval? Your attitude back then clearly showed that you hated me. It made me uncomfortable. I suggested breaking up to free you." "Enough. Don't always think that what you believe is right. I have long since moved on from the Emily incident. At that time, it was just a moment of anger, but you left me alone to go abroad." The determination in James' eyes surprised me. I know that incident had a big impact on him. I didn't expect he would remember it until now. No matter how I persuade myself, things cannot change. Maybe I really shouldn't have come back to disrupt the status quo. Until I met Lucas, I finally felt a little relieved. We walked all the way to Grandma's grave, looking at the tombstone, my nose tinged with sadness. "Long time no see, Grandma. Emily really resembles you." Teardrops flowed down uncontrollably. James turned his head and handed me a handkerchief. I took it and wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes. I realized this handkerchief was one I had used before. I didn't expect James still kept it. Looking at him, he had a calm expression. In my heart, I secretly thought he was really thick-skinned, but I couldn't help but think more. On the way back, it was still James who drove me. When I got out of the car, he said to me, "Come to the high school reunion the day after tomorrow. It's been so many years and you finally came back. You should also see everyone." I lowered my head and thought for a moment. I agreed. I casually put on a white dress, looking at myself in the mirror, thinking about seeing my high school classmates. It felt like I had returned to that time. If only that incident hadn't happened. At the class reunion, they were surprised to see me. They thought I would never come back. Their eyes were filled with questions and curiosity. Old classmate also came. He kept asking me how I've been lately. I gradually relaxed. I blended in with everyone. Everyone was very friendly. They all avoided sensitive topics. Lucas greeted me. James was sitting next to him, and the woman I had seen last time. I smiled and waved at Lucas. I continued chatting with the old classmate. It had been many years since we last met. We were all having a great time chatting. At that moment, James walked over and chatted with the old classmate for a bit. Then he just stood by the side. It made me feel a bit uncomfortable talking to the old classmate. Suddenly, someone bumped into me. The red wine in my hand spilled all over me. I looked up. It turned out to be the woman next to James. My white dress was a mess, stained with red wine. It was wet. It felt sticky. I couldn't wear it anymore. James took off his coat and draped it over me. He had Lao Ban take me to change clothes. I still hadn't fully regained my composure. Then I heard James arguing with that woman. James said to her, "Listen carefully. If it weren't for my dad insisting that I bring you here, I wouldn't pay any attention to you at all. You just intentionally spilled red wine on Emily. Then you should taste it yourself." All I heard was a scream. James, you still like Emily? She treats you like this, and you still defend her. Are you out of your mind? James said. I want to. If you slander her again in the future, it won't be as simple as just a glass of red wine. His words left me confused. Does he still have feelings for me? The homeroom teacher looked at me like this. He said it in a gentle tone. Emily, over the years, I've watched you all grow. I originally thought you would graduate and get married smoothly, but I didn't expect fate to play tricks on us. I can see James has never let you go in his heart. In the years you've been gone, he has been well behaved. He hasn't looked for a girlfriend again, although he doesn't say it outright. But I know it's all because of you. Emily, I can see it too. You still care about him, since you both have feelings for each other. Why make yourself suffer like this? I smiled helplessly. I shook my head. I no longer have the courage to face reality. Let's just pretend this mistake never happened. I want to drown my sorrows in alcohol. I drank one cup after another. The old teacher advised me to stop drinking. No matter how you try, you can't stop me. Later, I seemed to get drunk. I completely lost consciousness. All I could hear was someone saying they love me. They love me very, very much. I asked him, "Are you James? If you're James, then I love you. I only love James. Then why did you abandon James?" I didn't give up on James. It's just that he doesn't like me. His father doesn't like me either. Everyone has an issue with me. They suspect me. What's wrong with his dad? His dad doesn't believe me. He doesn't believe me either. But that day, I really wanted to save James. I don't know why I fainted, so they are all blaming me. Emily, my Emily, I will love you forever. I believe you. I finally sobered up early in the morning. I generally can't handle alcohol well. I drank too much all at once yesterday. I'm still feeling a bit dizzy. I took a moment to recover. That's when I realized this wasn't my home. I turned my head to take a look. James was lying next to me, shirtless. I immediately screamed. What are you doing in my bed? How did I end up here? James just smiled at me ambiguously. Have you forgotten yesterday? You were the one who kept bothering me. I lowered my head. I didn't dare to look at him. My face turned beet red. I felt both embarrassed and angry inside. Stop talking nonsense. How could I possibly do something like that? Don't twist the truth here. It must have been you taking advantage of me when I was drunk. James saw that I was about to get angry, so he stopped teasing me. You were drunk yesterday. You threw up all over me. I had to throw my clothes away. You clearly can't hold your liquor but drank so much. I spent the whole night taking care of you. I'm a bit embarrassed. I was just thinking of keeping my distance from him. I was just about to speak when I heard him say, Emily, let's get married. James, what are you talking about? It's impossible between us. Hearing his words, I was instantly stunned. I looked at him in confusion. I understand what you're worried about. Emily, I know that too. Back then you fainted, so you couldn't call the police. I also know. That incident made it so you could no longer dance. All these years. Actually, I am the one who owes you an apology. I love you, but I made you endure so many years of pain and grievance. I'm sorry. Emily, James held me tightly, repeatedly saying he was sorry. I couldn't hold back anymore. I burst into tears. So many years have passed. I still can't forget James, because I still love him in my heart. But because of what happened back then, we missed too much time. I have been in pain all along. I both hate James's dad, and I hate James. I hate myself even more. We were both competing against each other. James wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes and said, I have already told my dad about wanting to marry you. He doesn't oppose it anymore, and he can't control me. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't have separated. That home, I will never go back there again. That woman was arranged by my dad. I don't like her. Last time I just wanted to make you angry. I cried so hard I could hardly breathe. James held me tightly with concern. He kissed my forehead and kept comforting me. He asked me if I would agree to his proposal. I lifted my head. He said with a tone of dissatisfaction, Who proposes like you do? You want me to agree to marry you with nothing at all? I definitely won't agree. James seemed to be waiting for me to say that. He immediately took a ring out of his pocket, put it on me. It fits perfectly. I looked at his expectant gaze. I teased him on purpose. You must have prepared this ring a long time ago, so you've been planning this for me for a while. James's eyes were gentle, filled with affection. Yes, I liked you the first time I saw you. You were always on my mind, so, my Emily, will you marry me? I plan to use all the time I have left to respond to his words.